Someone says something to you. Nothing dramatic. A small remark, half a joke, a slight change in their tone, and before you've even finished hearing the words, it's already landed somewhere in your chest. You haven't decided what it means yet. You haven't waited or considered the context or reminded yourself they were probably just tired. None of that has happened. The feeling got there first, and the thinking is still on its way. And later, when you replay it, that's the part that confuses you most. Not that it hurt so fast. You know the shape of this. A song comes on in a shop and something in you shifts before you've recognized the melody. A stranger tells you something sad and you carry it around for 3 days like it happened to someone you love. A slightly flat message from a friend, and the whole afternoon quietly changes color. You walk into a room and know something's off before a single word is spoken. You've always known. You just never had a word for how you knew, and the world has an explanation ready for you, and you've heard it your entire life. You're too sensitive. You take things too personally. You overthink everything. Don't let it get to you. Said gently, sometimes. Said impatiently, more often. And after enough repetitions, you stopped arguing and started agreeing, quietly filing yourself under too much and learning to apologize for a reaction you never chose. But here's what almost nobody says out loud, and it changes the whole picture. It isn't that you feel more than other people. It's that you feel sooner. Watch what actually happens when something lands on someone else. There's a small gap. A remark arrives, and for a fraction of a second, their mind holds it, weighs it, decides what it means, and only then does the feeling arrive, already shaped by that judgment. They get a moment to brace. It's tiny, barely a heartbeat, and they've never noticed they have it because you don't notice a thing you've always had. You don't get that heartbeat. For you, the signal skips the middle step. It goes straight through, from the world into the body, and arrives at full volume before any part of you has had a chance to prepare. You feel it first, you understand it second, and by the time you understand, you're already halfway through the feeling. That's the whole mechanism, not a bigger reaction, a missing pause, and once you can see it, all the small, confusing things start lining up, the film everyone else shrugs at, while you're quietly wrecked in your seat. The half-second someone's face falls before they cover it. You catch that, and it stays with you all evening, while they've already forgotten. The email at 9 in the morning, written in 3 careless lines that somehow sets the tone for your entire day. The crowded place that leaves you hollowed out, not because you dislike people, but because there's no door between the room and you. It all just gets in. None of that is drama. None of it is you choosing to make things bigger than they are. It's what happens when input arrives without a buffer. And notice where you feel it, because it's almost never in your head first. It's a drop in the stomach, a tightness climbing the throat, heat rising up the neck and face, a sudden weight sitting just under the breastbone. Your body files the report before your mind has opened the envelope, which is exactly why arguing with yourself never works in that moment. You can't reason with something that has already finished arriving. By the time the sensible voice shows up with context and perspective, the body has been holding the news for several seconds already, and it's usually still holding it long after you've decided, intellectually, that it was nothing. There's usually a history to how you learned to hide this too. Somewhere early on, you had a reaction that was completely real to you, and the room treated it as too much. Maybe you cried at something and were told it wasn't worth crying about. Maybe you flinched at a tone and got asked why you were being difficult. Maybe nobody said anything at all. You just watched everyone else stay level while you didn't and drew the obvious conclusion. And a child in that situation doesn't decide to feel less because they can't. They decide to show less. That's the split that starts there, feeling at full volume on the inside, performing a normal volume on the outside. Most people carrying this have been running that gap so long they've stopped noticing its work. But here's where the real cost hides, and it isn't where most people look. Because if you don't have that pause built in, you learn to build one afterwards, manually, so the feeling lands instantly at full strength, and then you spend the next several minutes doing invisible work, arranging your face, keeping your voice level, deciding whether it's safe to say what just happened, explaining yourself, half apologizing, playing it down, or saying nothing at all and carrying it home to deal with alone. That's what actually exhausts you, not the feeling, the cleanup afterwards. Everybody else gets a small delay and then a proportionate reaction. You get a full reaction and then a cleanup crew. And the crew is always you, and it costs you something in the people closest to you too, in a way that's quietly painful, because they don't see the missing pause, they only see the size of the reaction, so they conclude you're dramatic, or fragile, or hard work. Some of them start managing you, choosing words carefully, going vague to avoid setting you off, deciding not to mention things, and that's its own kind of lonely. Being handled gently by someone who thinks the gentleness is a favor, when what you actually wanted was to be spoken to normally and simply not judged for how fast it landed. Others go the opposite way and get impatient, and you learn to shrink the report. It's fine, I'm just tired. Both roads end in the same place. You stop telling people what happens inside you, and then you feel unknown by the people who are closest to you, which, for someone wired like this, hurts more than the original remark ever did. And there's a second layer that costs even more because it never switches off. Once you know things arrive at full volume with no warning, some part of you starts watching for what might be coming. Scanning tone, reading faces before anything is said, bracing in advance, just in case. And so you end up carrying both at once, everything landing unfiltered, and a constant low-level guard trying to see it coming, full input and permanent anticipation. No wonder an ordinary day can leave you feeling like you ran one. I want to be careful here, because this is easy to hear as a diagnosis, and it isn't one. This isn't a flaw with a fix. It isn't a defect in your wiring that needs correcting, because it's the same wiring that does everything you actually like about yourself. The reason a piece of music can undo you is the same reason a friend's unspoken sadness never gets past you. The reason a careless remark lands so hard is the same reason you notice before anyone else does that someone in the room has gone quiet. You don't get to keep the depth and remove the exposure. It's not two systems. It's one, running in both directions. Turn it down to stop the hurt, and the beauty goes quiet at the same volume. The people who moved you most in your life were almost certainly built this way too. And think about what people actually come to you for. Not for advice usually. For the fact that you get it immediately, without needing it explained twice. You're the one who notices the friend who's gone quiet in the group and messages them privately. You're the one who remembers the thing they mentioned once, months ago, because it landed properly the first time. When someone's world falls apart, you're often who they call, and it isn't because you have answers. It's because sitting with someone in a bad moment requires actually feeling it with them, and most people can't do that. They get uncomfortable and reach for something reassuring to say. You don't need to reach, you're already there. That's not a personality quirk you developed, it's the exact same missing filter doing the thing it's good at. So the question worth sitting with isn't how do I feel less? It's much simpler and much more useful. If the pause is what's missing, can you give yourself one? Not suppression. That's the trap most people fall into, and it doesn't work. Swallowing a feeling doesn't remove it, it just delays it until it comes out somewhere less convenient. This is something different. It's putting a small, deliberate gap between the feeling and what you do with it. The feeling still arrives at full volume. That part isn't negotiable. But what you decide it means, and what you do about it, can wait. Because here's something worth noticing. The feeling itself is fast, but it's also short. The initial hit, the drop in your chest, the heat in your face, that part passes in a couple of minutes if you leave it alone. What lasts for hours is not the feeling. It's the story you build on top of it. They're annoyed with me. I've ruined it. They've always thought this. That's the part that runs all afternoon, and that part is not the feeling. It's interpretation, and interpretation is exactly where a pause can go. So the shift is small and very ordinary. When something lands, let it land. Don't argue with it, don't perform being fine, but delay the meaning. Wait until the first wave has passed before deciding what it says about you, about them, about anything. You'll be surprised how often the meaning that felt certain at full intensity looks complete. It also helps to name what's happening while it's happening, in the plainest words you have. Not analyzing it, not explaining why, just labeling this is the wave, it's here. It will pass in a few minutes. That sounds almost too simple to matter, but there's a reason it works. Feeling something at full volume with no warning is frightening, partly because it feels endless in the moment, as if this is now the state you live in. Naming it as a wave restores the one piece of information the missing pause took from you, that it has an end. You're not talking yourself out of the feeling. You're just reminding yourself that you've been here before and it moved on, and it will this time too. And there's one more thing that helps more than people expect. Say it plainly, sometimes to someone safe. That landed harder than it probably should have. Give me a minute. Not an apology, not a confession, just information. Because most of the cleanup you do is required by the situation. It's required by the assumption that your reaction is a problem other people need protecting from. Usually, it isn't. Usually, they just needed to know why you went quiet. None of this makes you slower. You'll always be the one who feels it first. That's the trade, and it's not one you were offered. It's just how you arrived. But there's a difference between arriving early and having to act on it immediately, and almost nobody teaches you that difference. Feeling something instantly does not obligate you to respond instantly. And it's worth saying this last part clearly, because you've probably never heard it said in your direction. There's nothing broken about arriving early. Everyone in that room is going to feel it eventually. The sadness in the song, the weight of the story, the shift in someone's voice. You just got there first, before there was time to put on anything protective. You were never too much. You just never had the pause everyone else was handed for free. And the pause, unlike the wiring, is something you can build.